So after the theory, let's now have a look at the practice. And as we could see in the process flow in the previous lesson, the first important component that we have to use in Rapid Start service are the configuration worksheets. And let's go to the application so that we can look at an example of such a worksheet. So first of all, as you can see, I'm using the Rapid Start Services Implementer Role Center. So I've opened my Kronos International company, and I've enabled the Rapid Start Services Implementer Role Center, which means that I have very easy access to everything that is important when working with Rapid Start. You can see the different components that we just discussed, like the worksheet. You can see the questionnaires, the templates, and so on. And you can also see a number of very interesting cues that show me the promoted tables, the ones that we didn't start yet, and so on. So, like I just said, the first component, the configuration worksheet. So I can click on the configuration worksheet in the ribbon. And here you can see a very nice example of how such a configuration worksheet can look like. Now again, what is the worksheet? Well, it's a worksheet in which I will list all the tables that I need to set up a company from the perspective that we discussed in the previous lesson. So for example, this is a basic setup. So this is a worksheet that I can use to do the basic setup of a company. So things that you need to set up for each company independent of the activity or the sector in which the company is working. So you can see, for example, each company probably will have customers, vendors, they have bank accounts, they need a chart of accounts, they need accounting periods, there is the general ledger setup, and so on. And we have posting groups. So as you can see, this is basic setup that you probably have to do for each company. Now, when we include these tables here in the configuration worksheet, we can use them from Rapid Start Services point of view, which means that we can use, for example, customers, vendors, in combination with the data migration in Excel. We can use, for example, questionnaires to set up the general ledger setup, the sales and receivables setup, and so on. So we can use a number of very interesting functions, but first we need to specify these tables here in the worksheet. Now let's have a look at how we can do this. So let's discover the most important fields. We start with a line type, and you can see here the three different types that we have available: area, group, and table. So table is of course very important because this is a line type that I will use to define the table that I would like to include. For example, table 18, the customer table, 23, vendor table, and so on. Then we have area and group, and as you can see here, area and group is used to create a specific structure so that the configuration worksheet is easier to work with. Because you can have configuration worksheets including quite a lot of lines, like for example this one. And by grouping these lines using the line type, it will be more efficient, it will be easier to work with the worksheet, as you can see here. So then we have the table ID and the name, so that speaks for itself. And then we have the field promoted table. Now this is a field that I can use to very easily apply a filter. So for example, if I would like my colleague or my customer to look into specific tables, I can select them. So for example, customer, GL account, and general ledger setup. So I would like my colleague or my customer to have a look at these tables and work on these tables in a new company. So I can very easily select here the promoted table field and then click on promoted only in the ribbon. You see, so like I just said, a very easy way to apply a filter. So now we can only see the promoted tables, and this is also something that you can see now here in the role center by clicking on the queue. So it will show us the promoted tables. Okay, so very useful to highlight specific tables that you would like to emphasize. Okay, so I will remove the promoted table field. Then we have a reference. You can provide references, for example, to reference to specific files, to reference to a website, for example, in which you can find specific units of measure codes, specific country codes. So that's something that we can do here with reference. Then these fields I will explain a little bit later. And that's for me also a very interesting function. You can use the configuration worksheet as a checklist. So by assigning a responsible ID, and by using the status field, I can use it as a checklist. So I can say, first of all, that, for example, Vincent should take care of the data migration, so the master data. Suppose that he should work on customers, vendors, items, and so on. So I can assign his user account to these fields or to these lines. And then once that Vincent starts working in a new company and is migrating customer, vendor data and so on, he can use the status field to specify that he is, for example, working on the customer data. He is working, for example, on vendor data, but he already completed, for example, items and so on, you see? So in that way, the worksheet becomes sort of a checklist that different users can use to update on the work that they already provided, you see? And also here, you can see now that my queues in the role center are updated. So we have completed one table. There are 2 tables in progress, and we should still start 32 tables. So that's something, again, very interesting to use, the checklist feature, you could say. Then the page ID. So this is so we are defining tables, but as you know, tables are displayed as pages, and here you can see the page ID that is displayed for this table. Now also a very interesting feature is the licensed table, because if you prepare such a configuration worksheet, a lot of chances that you're doing this with your partner license. For example, when you're at the office, you're preparing a worksheet and you're using your own partner license, which means that by default all the tables are licensed. However, if you start working on a new company with the customer license, not all tables included in the worksheet might be licensed, and here you can see if a table is licensed, yes or no. Then we have the number of records. So here you can see that we already have a number of records, and that's of course because I'm working in an existing demo company, Kronos International. And that might be a very good idea to do in real life. So you can have an existing demo company in which you can set up your configuration worksheet. And the benefit is that I, for example, already have like a standard chart of accounts that I can use. We already have, for example, specific payment terms that we can use. I could already have a list of postcodes, you see. So it's sometimes a very good idea to start from an existing company, because you can use all the standard master data from the existing company and include it in your configuration worksheet and later in your package and in your rapid start file. But I will come back to this a little bit later. Then dimensions as columns. So here you can specify if you're migrating data that you would like to include dimensions as columns in, for example, the Excel templates. And so we know that Kronos International has dimensions such as area, customer group, and so on. So if you want to use these dimensions in the data migration process, you can select this field, and you will see that they can be included as columns in the Excel template. If your dimensions, at the other hand, are only demo data, you can also specify that you do not want to include them. And so by simply clearing the field here. Then copy available, so can we copy the data, for example, and then also the licensed page. And so not only the licensed table, but could also be interesting to see if the page that we're working with is licensed. So this is the configuration worksheet. And so as you can see, quite a lot of things that we can specify here, and that will be included later on in the package. Now, creating such a worksheet requires, of course, some experience. You need to know which tables that should be included. And it also could take you some time to create a complete configuration worksheet. And that's why it's interesting to have a look at some very interesting functions that we can use when creating a new configuration worksheet. Let me first remove all the lines of the existing worksheet. So suppose now that we need to start from scratch. So I need to start from scratch and create a new configuration worksheet. Okay, first of all, like I just said, we need to have some experience. So I need to know that in my configuration worksheet, I would like to include table 18, the customer table, because I would like to use the worksheet in a later stage to, for example, import customer data. So I will need to include the customer table. So that's the first thing, the first very important thing. But that's of course not the only thing, because as you might know, from the customer table we make many table relations to other tables. And here in the fact box you can see all the related tables. So you can see that we have a table relation with the payment terms table, the currency table, and so on. And that's of course because for a customer we need to specify a payment term. We might want to specify a currency, the language, each customer has a country, and so on. So this means that in my worksheet, if I would like to do a complete customer migration, I do not only have to include the customer table, but I also have to include many of these related tables. Here you can already see the related table. So what I could do is go to a second line and add, for example, table 3. However, there's a function that can do this for us automatically. So if I go to the first line, so my customer table, I can now go to actions, and there you can see that there is an action get related tables. So instead of entering all these related tables manually, I can simply run the function, and as you can see now, the system will now automatically insert all the related tables of the customer table. And now it's of course much easier to start removing related tables that I might not need. Suppose, for example, that I don't need territory, I can simply select the line, click on delete, and remove the territory line. If I don't use, for example, let's say tax area, I can select tax area and I can delete the line, and so on. You see? So it's much easier to use the function in order to insert all the related tables instead of inserting all the related tables manually one by one. So that's the first very interesting function that you can use. Then the second one, if I remove my lines again, so there's also the getTables function. Now the getTables function is something that we can use to, for example, retrieve all the tables that contain data, including related tables, dimension tables, and so on. So if you start from an existing demo company, like I just said, this also might be an interesting function to use, because probably you have set up the demo company in a way that all the tables that you would like to include in your package should be inserted here in the worksheet, and then you can use this function because these tables probably then also will have setup data, for example. Okay, I will not run the function here because this will insert too many tables for my example, but in real life, again, this could be an interesting function to use. And then there's also delete duplicate lines, because if you use these functions, you might have specific tables that are inserted automatically several times. Because let's take the payment term. The payment term is a related table for the customer table, but also for the vendor table. So it might be possible that the payment term table is included several times. And then by using the delete duplicate lines function, you will see that of course the system will remove all the duplicate lines so that each table is only inserted once. So these are a couple of interesting functions that you can use to create your configuration worksheet.